read that too? Yeah, I
Ronnie off. He had one Ronnie off.
Morning. Fine, how you doing?
Yeah, I had read it all.
We've been out around anyway. She was trying to squeeze out. Man, oh, we got it all, man. He wouldn't do it. Really?
Where was my clicker? Here we go. Oh, let me do this real quick. All right, it's good to have everybody with us this morning on this first day of the week. We'll be in Genesis chapter 45. Genesis 45, since we didn't get to meet Wednesday, we'll continue on to stay within it. So we're not gonna miss a lesson, we'll never miss a lesson in these. Genesis 45, Joseph builds himself to the brothers. It's a big chapter, and it's only 28 verses, but still a big chapter of what's going on here. And we'll see this. So let's go and begin with a few things. See where everybody's at. We'll go to our area of our drills. Drills, we're going to arrange Bible characters in chronological order. So here we go, the order. So someone you see, I have Enoch, Adam, Seth, Eve, Cain, Methuselah, and Abel. Someone give me the first person. Adam, all right, we all know that. All right, Adam, give me the second one. Eve, all right, we got Eve. How was the third one? What was it? Cain, okay. Fourth one? Abel, all right. Fifth? Who said what? Seth, all right, good job. Who said? Adam and Eve's son, that's right. Your brother Cain and Abel, all right. And then the final one is number 6. Do I have 2 of them? 2 more? No, yeah, I got one more. 2 more. Who's next after Seth? Enoch or Methuselah? Enoch? I heard Enoch. Good job. All right, and then the last one. Did you figure that one out? Yeah, Methuselah. All right. All right, good job. So we got those taken care of. All right, so let's go a little bit further now. 41, chapter 41, Joseph prepares for the famine. The first question is, why did Pharaoh put Joseph over Egypt to prepare for the coming famine?
God showed him all the things.
What's that?
God showed him all the things that showed him. So Pharaoh told him he was the son and the most wisest for him.
Exactly. Because God showed everything to Joseph. And Pharaoh already saw the things. We understand what was going on and we realize it. And this made a big, huge impact for Joseph because of what God did for him. Which brings us to the next one. Let me see. Where'd my question go? Okay, I guess that. All right, next one up. Genesis 42. Brothers go to Egypt to buy food. What accusations did Joseph make against the 10 brothers when they were trying to buy grain in Egypt? They despised it. They came out to search the land exactly for its nakedness. They despised. Next one, how did Joseph intend to prove the honesty of his brothers? How do you do that?
Putting money in the sack.
Money in the sack, okay. Let's think of something else before. They hadn't gotten to that point yet. He said there in chapter 42, 19, 20 something they had to do before he would, what was that?
Leave his brother.
Leave his brother. That's exactly right. Leave his brother. Now the question is, the next part of it, as it says here, which of the 10 brothers did he keep? Simeon. Exactly right. Good job. All right, let's go to the next one. Genesis 43. The brothers eat lunch in Joseph's house. Now, so the question is, how did the brothers feel about their invitation to eat at the home of the Egyptians? They were afraid. They were scared. They didn't, but some people are like, oh, this is great. We get to go see the second in command. They're like, we don't want to go see him because something bad's going to happen to us. That's exactly what they thought, which brings us to the next question. Describe the portion of food given. The portion of food given. Make sure my sound's on. Describe the portion of food given Benjamin at the noon meal served to the brothers at Joseph's house. 5 times the amount. That's exactly right. 5 times the amount. What we see there. All right. So the next one is. Come on. There we go. All right. So the next one. Just a second, folks. We're not moving. Hold on, man. I need to make sure we're live on Facebook. It was on there, now it's gone. 1 second. There we go. All right, we're good. All right, what physical act did the brothers perform to show their sorrow for the discovery of the lost cup in Benjamin's sack in Genesis 44? They tore their clothes. Exactly right. Exactly. Joseph said, who should be his slave for possession of the stolen cup? Well, what did he actually say, Benjamin, or who did he say? Whoever sacked and found it in. Exactly right. Whoever sacked and they found it in, of course, that was where it was at. Benjamin's sack. And so that was really hard, on the brothers. They're about to really, things really bad for them. All right, so good job. Questions are done. Move on to the timeline. Just remember, we're 1900 in this area here with Judah. So all that's going well. We're still dealing with Benjamin, but now we're going to actually deal with all the brothers. And what we find they will come to him. We've already had it on there, but today everybody would be adding to their map. They would be adding Goshen. Goshen is a very, very important part of Egypt because it is the most what out of all the country? What do you think? Most fertile of all the country, exactly right. I mean, it was the best of Egypt. It was the best. And in fact, I want to show you, here's a satellite picture. Look how it looks. Do you notice the difference between it and the rest of everywhere else? It's green. It's green. Yeah, what's that?
It's even greener than Canaan.
It's even greener than Canaan. I mean, look at that. Look how Canaan is exactly right. I mean, it's where all these rivers come in together. They come in from the Mediterranean and then they feed into the Nile River. So it's the place that you would want to live, I guess you'd say, of all things. Which of course brings us now here to Joseph's going to make himself known to his brothers in this moment. You know, today is the account of Joseph's action and reaction. This is what I would say one of the finest accounts, you know, of Joseph's character that we're going to see here. And, you know, it has to do with forgiveness, and all this lesson does here. And it's just remarkable how he reacts and even how the brothers will react to this. So by saying that, let's go ahead and get into reading it. 45, 1 through 4, Joseph makes himself known. If someone go and read that for us, please.
Then Joseph could not restrain himself before all those who stood by him, and he cried out, "Make everyone go out from me." So no one stood with him while Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And he wept aloud, and the Egyptians in the house of Pharaoh heard it. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Does not my father still live?" But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed in his presence. And Joseph said to his brothers, "Please come near to me." So they came near. Then he said, "I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt."
Thank you. So, yeah, you know, Joseph's stomach must have been in knots himself, you know, I mean, because he's about to, he's put them through all these different tests, and, you know, and he's not done, he's actually going to give another test in a little bit, but he's doing all this before he reveals himself, and, you know, he wants to make sure that his brothers have what? That they've changed, exactly right, they've changed from what they were, and so far, he's seen that, right? He's seen it seems like they've changed. They've been very, you know, sorrowful for what they did to Joseph. You know, even though they don't know that's him yet, that we see here, they're very sorry about that. They've been repentant of it, and we just see all this going on and going forward. So as Joseph's there, you know, he puts everybody out, and once again, he puts everyone out. You know, his brothers got to be thinking, what? What's going on here? What have we done again? I mean, it's bad. You know, what's going on here? What's happening? And it's remarkable. It says that Joseph starts crying, and it gives us a understanding of how close he was to Pharaoh's house. You know, how he would have been there. And because it says, who heard his crying? It said the Egyptians heard it where? All the way in Pharaoh's house. They heard this. And, you know, and remember, we know that Pharaoh knows about his family without a doubt, and we know that his wife and his sons, and we know that also we would understand that we already talked about it, you know, those that were working in his home and just different people. And when we see this, we don't know who all, you know, knew about this, knew that he was a Hebrew, knew that he was actually, you know, came from there, about his brothers and his family, but quite a bit did. So he pours out, you know, he just starts crying. And Joseph, as we read, you know, as we said, made everyone leave except for them. And Joseph realized that, you know, this was family business. You know, it needed to be private. It didn't need to go out to everybody. And, I mean, think about, you know, there were thoughts, there were memories, there were problems, there were relationships that were involved that were not outside of the family. You know, it was all right here, and that people probably had not seen, like I said, most of them not known except for some. And, you know, this is a great example for us to look at today, because I'm going to tell you, in our day and age today, the world with public media basically has invaded the privacy of everybody's lives. In fact, if you notice, think about how many people hang their dirty laundry out on Facebook. I mean, it amazes me sometimes when someone puts on there, you know, talking about what happened to them or their family or, you know, so-and-so. It's just like, really? I mean, you don't need to be saying, oh, keep it to yourself. See, no one has the right to know basically every problem or intimate feeling between the people in the home. They just don't. And we see that because God knows it, and that's where we would keep it out with God, and we understand that. Don't think I'm saying we shouldn't let the church know when we need prayers and stuff like that. That's not what I'm saying. But, I mean, I guarantee you, we all don't know everything that goes on between our family members. You know, each one of us as we see that. And now, so all this is going on, and he's just laid this out to his brothers, and his brothers just start talking like crazy, right? No, they're what? They're quiet. They're speechless. You know, and we have a good idea. You know, we have a really good idea of what was going on in their heads. They were scared once again, probably, of what is happening here. And now he tells us, and so we ask this, you know, do you really think that they were scared or that they were excited? You know, which one was it? Well, what does it say here? Someone go and read that again, verse 3.
So they're dismayed.
Someone read the yellow part there, up there behind me.
But
Anyway.
his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed in his presence.
So they couldn't answer wrong. Now, dismayed is more than just, you know, scared. They were basically like, huh? Yeah, totally shocked. Like, you know, do you think that's what they were expecting to hear? No way, no way. They still believe Joseph is what, more likely? Dead. And so here, this comes in. Now, remember, Joseph was just flooded with that emotions, everything. And they look at, and they got to be like, I mean, what do we say? What do we do? And Joseph makes it very clear, because they're standing probably a pretty good distance from him, where he's up, you know, up higher probably there, and he tells them to do what?
Come closer.
He says, come closer, so they could hear him, so they could see him closer and see what's going on here. And we see all this event taking place, and it's huge. And I would think they would too be walking up like, if this is Joseph, their first thought, people would say, oh, right, great. Their first thought would probably be what? But yeah, what is he getting ready to do? You know, is he getting ready to put his vengeance on us because of everything that happened, what we did? And so we don't know what all is going on in their head, but we do know it's about to get very emotional, and a love is going to show up really quick. Dad, go ahead.
You said that, you said what I'm thinking is, it had to be too that they had such a rush of thoughts coming to their head. You know, how they treated their brother even before they sold him. You know, how they mistreated him. Then how they took him and sold him to the Ishmaelites. And then, you know, the things that happened start coming together of all the tests that Joseph gave. That had to be a rush of emotions and thoughts there to bring about this idea of being shocked and dismayed. Look at how our brother's treating us now.
Yeah. I mean, you know, and we would, you know, with us thinking about this, you know, you think about how many things have happened in your life and how quick, you know, as we're just saying, how quick things can flood in really quick, you know, how fast all these thoughts, all these emotions, and it's the way our brain works. And here's what's interesting too: each brother may not have had the same thought. You know, they were all dismayed, it says, but you know, they may not have had the same thought. I mean, who knows for sure more than likely he's done nothing wrong at all? Who's the one that knows he's done nothing wrong whatsoever? Benjamin. I mean, Benjamin. And you know, the overjoyment and all this. And so the brothers, all this is going on, which brings us to verses 5 and 8. Joseph isn't going to scold his brothers. He's not going to get mad at them. He's not going to scream at them. He's going to comfort them. And you know, and this, like I said, this shows us so much more about Joseph. We've already seen a lot about him, how he's taking care of his family. He's going beyond, because every time he sent a sack of food back, what did he send back with it? The money that they put in. He's really taking care of them. So let's go ahead and read what it says here, verses 5 through 8. So we'll read that for us, please.
But now do not therefore be grieved or angry with yourselves, because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. For these 2 years the famine has been in the land, and there are still 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvesting. And God sent me before you to preserve a posterity for you in the earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So now it was not you who sent me here, but God. And he has made me a father to Pharaoh, and land, the Lord of all his house, and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt.
Thank you. Now think about this for a moment. I mean, when they hear this, there had to have been a relief, you know, of everything that was going on with him, you know, that must have come over his brothers. And they're probably thinking too, you know, explain this. What do you mean it was God, you know, that brought you, you know, here and not us? You know, believing that they were, like we said, about to suffer the consequences of their own actions, of the things they had done wrong. Joseph then tells them that they had basically little to do with it completely of selling them. You know, of course, they were involved in the physical part, but it was all God's plan, we see, to get him there. And, you know, and they got to be thinking, he said, notice what he said very clear. He said there were 2 years of famine so far, so that leaves how many more did he say to go? 5. I mean, they got to be thinking first before he, you know, gets in. See him talking. I wouldn't doubt it the way some people think. You know, like, are you kidding me? You know how many times we're going to have to come back and forth to Egypt? I mean, you know, to get food, or, you know, or what's going to happen here. They don't realize what's going to happen. In fact, Joseph, we know once, but it's Pharaoh that's actually going to step out and, you know, tell them what they need to do, what he needs to do. But remember also, this is God. God is behind this. And that's why we see this verse 7 so important, that God sent me before you to preserve, you know, the prosperity, you know, of you in the earth. Basically, God has, you know, sent me to preserve your life. That's what this is. And to save your life from this, you know, this great deliverance of what's going on. Dad, go ahead.
This would not be the only person that we read about. Esther was told, you have come here for such a time as this. And sometimes today even we think, you know, in God's providence, am I here in this place now? If all these steps been taken to put me here, or us here together through God's providential care.
Yep. And we need to realize that, as we just said about Esther and about Joseph. We need to understand that it still happens today. Meaning there are things, you know, God will put us in places at times. Now, not going to move us against our will. Of course, we have to know the will of God and understand that, realize that. But I guarantee you, there have been people put in my life that, you know, if I would have taken a different turn, I would have never heard it from them. Or same thing, me being put in somebody else's life. You know, and God has his hand in that when it's dealing with him. When, you know, we're Christians living the life of God, I guarantee you the providence of God is working in many areas of your life that you may not even know, you know, that we see this. So here it is. You know, I know the brothers, of course, were relieved because they weren't going to suffer at Joseph's hand. But I wonder if there may have been a little bit of here we go again. Joseph the terrific, you know. Joseph's in charge, you know, and all this happening here. And I say that, you know, they're thinking back, you know, back to his dreams that he had. You might think that, but then again, when I look at this, I don't think that's going to be the case. I think they're beyond that. I think they know that they've done wrong. And they've got to be thinking this too. We've told Joseph how sorry we are. Because remember, they didn't look at him as Joseph. They were just looking at him as an Egyptian, you know, second in charge, the governor of everything that was going on there, as we see. Brother Doug, get your hand up first. Go ahead.
Well, going back to what Ed was saying about the way they thought, and the farther they got into this, one of them out of 11 had to think, what are we going to tell Dad? We have lied to him for years and years that Joseph got killed from an animal, or we found it, you know, his robe with blood on it, and they were the ones that did it. And now they're going to have to go back and say that, you know, Joseph is alive and wants you to come down with it. You know, what would you say?
Right. And you know, it's interesting that we see that because we know that it seems, like we said, so far it seems like Jacob knows they had their hand in something that went on wrong. But he still believes, without a doubt, just like they do, that he's dead. And you're right. Imagine going back saying, Joseph's alive. In fact, he's not just alive. He's second in charge of all of Egypt. Let me rephrase that. He's second in charge of all the Mediterranean world. I mean, that's the way you look at it. And that would be, who's the oldest, of course? Once again, the oldest brother, Reuben. I mean, it would usually fall on the oldest brother once again with all this happening and everything's here. Dad, go ahead.
Another thing with what you're saying about the brothers is something for us to think about. When we've done something wrong and someone comes to us and we've repented, we have tried to change, and they came to us and say, I forgive you. What a relief that is. And I think that's one of the things that happens to these brothers. They're so relieved that, look, we've treated our brother this way, we've done all of these horrible things, and yet he has forgiven us.
Yeah.
Just like God does.
That's right. And that's why I think, you know, if they're thinking in their head all these things, you know, we got to do 5 more years of family, all that is the farthest away from them right now. It's exactly right. They're just thinking, wow, what Joseph has done for them. And exactly right, we see that for God. And I'll move my way back to David first. Go ahead, David.
I was thinking the same thing he was about forgiveness. There wasn't an ounce of resentment in Joseph's
That's
heart.
right.
And I think about, one of the powerful lessons we learn from him is to be that way too. I think about Ephesians 4:32, where it says, "Be kind, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, even as God for Christ's sake has forgiven you."
Yep.
And we're supposed to forgive when people are repenting and turning back from their ways. And we learn that from Joseph. Really good.
That's right, we do. And and then when we look at this, we didn't, like we said, we didn't see any resentment in Joseph. That's right. And as we look at this and we go back to the whole thing, remember, it shows that this has been on their mind forever, ever since they did it. It's been on their mind for years of what they did. But Joseph, leading up to this point, has brought it to the forefront of their mind because of the things he's done. The things that it looks like, God has done this to us. He's put us in this moment. And now they're learning why all that was done. They're learning why the money was back in the sacks. They're learning why the cup was there. And why Simeon was kept. They're getting to see these things and all that happening with it as we see taking place with that. And Brother Clifford, go ahead.
I just want to back up to verse 3 for a moment when Joseph asked his brothers, introduced himself and said, "I am Joseph. Does my father still live?" Is there any way that Joseph would have known whether his father was deceased or still alive?
Well, he'd already asked him before they went back last time. He asked him, does my father still live? Does your father, not my father, does your father still live? And they said yes. And remember, they said that he does live. And so here's Joseph, verse 3. Joseph, does my father still live? Here's the difference. He always said that, does your father live? Now remember, they had to go all the way back to Canaan. That's 300-some miles. I mean, it's a long distance to get there and come back. Joseph was thinking something still could probably happen to his father. Could have died, in that little bit of time. That's why he asked it again. And, and he wants him to, he wants him to be there with him. He wants to make sure, is my dad alive? Because if he's not alive, someone might say, well, there's no reason to send them back. There's a reason to send back to get everybody else and bring them. But he wants to know, so he says his father's still intact. He's the head of the household. Very important. And the way it seems like Jacob is holding on living just the possibility of maybe seeing Joseph again. And that's what we see through this. And because when he sees Joseph when we see it Wednesday, he's like, okay, now I'm ready to what? He goes, now that I've seen you, I'm ready to die. I mean, my family's going to be taken care of. Everything's good. God has done exactly right. So that's what we see with that, where it's going with that. That's the other hand. Any other hand? Dad, go ahead.
Going back again to Joseph, when he forgave his brothers, I think, and this is only me thinking, that he put all of what they did out of his mind. He didn't think about it anymore.
Right.
And that's a hard thing to do when somebody has wronged you so hard, to actually put that out of your mind. It's not easy. Those thoughts are always there. You have to do something to keep those thoughts from coming back and interfering with that forgiveness.
That's exactly right. I always find it interesting that, Joseph, here he is second in command. Did Joseph have the power to send somebody to Canaan to see if his family was still alive? Sure. Of course he had the power, but did he do it? No. And this is part of God, this with all this happening, and I believe this works for the story for us today, as you're saying, asking forgiveness. God will always be there for us, but God's not going to come to you and say, hey, you need to forgive me now. That's not what, you need to ask forgiveness now. He doesn't do that. He's already done that in the Bible. He's told us that if we do wrong, ask him to forgive you. And here's the great part. He is faithful to do so. And that's what Joseph, even though he didn't have the New Testament yet, Joseph was living the whole Bible. I mean, living by what God said. And that's where I said the character of Joseph is just amazing. And there's so many similarities. People will use this in sermons, classes, everything. There's so many similarities between Joseph and Jesus. I mean, so many. And but regardless, what we need to look at here is Joseph is staying the man he needs to, but he also does something else, verse 7. Joseph pictures his life not as a leader above his family, not by you bow down to me as was done even though they had to, of course, with the dreams, and then it happened. But he looks at his life more of a service to his father and his family. That's the way he sees it. Joseph learns that all these years that are in the past were for all the glory of God. Everything had the glory of God. He knows that God intended for him to be exactly where he is, and if that is the case, why would he harbor resentment or a bad attitude against his brother? Because, number one, we see him not doing it, but if he did, he would actually be holding resentment against who? Would it be his brothers? No, because he knows God put him there. Who would his resentment be against them? Be against God. And Joseph, we don't see him like that. We don't see him as that type of man. And that's great. I mean, that's so big and so important because it lets us know so much more about Joseph as we see in the next few weeks leading up to his death of what's going on and how his father will bless, Joseph's two sons and that extension of their Joseph, how it will continue to live on. And we see that. So it's really important to see all this. Does someone else have a question or comment or thought? Nope. All right, Doug, go ahead.
Well, also, Joseph, he knew God put him where he was. So God had taken him away from his family, and maybe he shouldn't go and look for him. Maybe it's God's will to do that. And also, he spent a lot of time in jail. And so, there was a long time, because he was not the ruler of Egypt until the 2 years, that the famine was in there, or the 7 years before the famine. So you're talking about just a few years, and he had his hands full getting ready for the famine and everything. So there was, some reasons that he would not have gone and to see if his father was, or even sent somebody to see for him.
And I think it comes down to the main fact you said, he really believed this was all God, which he was right to believe that, and this is God working. And, a lot of times I think that's where it is, we see God and we want to help God, with our own lives. We want to say, God, I know you're doing this, but let's try this too. And it doesn't work out, and God starts telling you, settle down, slow down, let me do things. And we see that, and it's hard. I mean, remember, once again, think about it. Joseph is 40 now. How many years, how old was he when he left? 17. I want you to think about how many changes just went on in your life from the age 17 to the age 40. And now imagine this with him. I mean, it is, and living with that all his life, is that right? Joseph, I mean, your thought would have been, my brothers hate me. My family wants nothing to do with me. No one else has come out to check on me, to try to find me. And that's another thing. And, and Joseph could have just, thought about that his whole time. And he would have been miserable. But he doesn't. He moves forward. And that's what we see in our lives today, too. When things happen in our life, we have to learn to move forward and continue to trust God. And that's what we see with him. Which brings us to this next part. Joseph, after he found his brothers alive, his dad's alive, he's made things better with his brothers right here. Everybody's aware of everything. He said, it's time for you to go get my dad. You go get him, let him know I'm alive, and let's work this out. So that's verses 9 through 28. But let's go ahead and look at verses 9 through 13. 9 through 13, Joseph is going to make it very clear. He's going to give them instructions. This is what you need to do. And to show his brothers, not just that they're not the same men they were, they're different. They listen to Joseph, don't they? They listen exactly what he says to do. And they're going to do it. So we'll go and read it for us. Genesis 45, 9 through 13.
Hurry up and go to my father and say to him, thus says your son Joseph, God has made me Lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, do not tarry. You shall dwell in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near to me, you and your children, your children's children, your flocks and your herds, and all that you have. There I will provide for you, lest you and your household and all that you have come to poverty. For there are still 5 years of famine. And behold, your eyes and the eyes of my brother Benjamin see that it is my mouth that speaks to you. So you shall tell my father of all my glory in Egypt and of all that you have seen. and you shall hurry and bring my father down here.
Thank you. And remember now, they're close to him now. He's not talking to them like an Egyptian guy anymore. He's talking to them as their brother. And all this happening. So I want us to think about this for just a moment. And this is probably what Doug was saying, what others say when we think about this, is they have all these miles to go. And, and on the way back, it's like, what are we going to tell Dad? What are we going to tell Dad? We're going to tell Dad exactly what Joseph said. But you imagine that conversation. Here's where it is. Some people might say, oh, Jacob's going to be so mad at them up now. Jacob's not going to have opportunity to think about that. Jacob, all he's going to be thinking about is what? Get me there. I want to see my son. I want to see Joseph. And that's what we find in it. We actually see it. So think about these instructions real quick when you break them down out of those verses. Number one, it says, go tell Dad that I'm alive and God has made me great in Egypt. So it's all about God once again, right? All coming back to God. We see that. Number two, he said to them, tell him to return to me quickly. Come back. Don't tarry. Don't take your time. Just get over here. And that I'll give you Goshen to dwell in, so we will near to one another, and I'll take care of you all. What's interesting about this, he says, I will give you Goshen. From what we hear from Pharaoh a little bit, it sounds like him and Pharaoh have already had a talk, about this, that, hey, these are my brothers that have been coming here, and all that, and basically, and Pharaoh seems like he's the one that's like, bring them on, let them be here. Which is going to be very unusual, because we're going to get there too, because I will say this, Egyptians looked down on herdsmen. They looked very low on them. They hated them. I mean, they didn't want anything to do with them. And we see that, but that's not going to be the case. It's going to be different to a sense. Number three, the next question. Tell Dad of all my glory in Egypt and all you've seen. So let him know everything. I can imagine that conversation that they're having with Jacob, or Israel as his name's been changed to, and at the same time, him just like, okay, I don't want to hear more, just get me there, let's pack up, let's go, and we see this, and so, but remember, they have to get Jacob to believe it. They have to get him to believe it, because when they first tell him, he may think like, are you crazy? What are you guys thinking about? He's dead. So that's why Joseph, we're going to see in a moment, sinned so much. We're like, why does Joseph send so much stuff back with him? Why would he do this? Well, it's number one, to show that this is the case, and number two, to bring everything back with them, as we're going to see with these wagons and so on. It's just remarkable of what we find. So let's look at verses 14 through 15. Joseph's affection for his brother. Any comments to see him?
I was just going to say that when Joseph sends those folks back and his brothers, Jacob acts a little bit like, to me, as I thought, the prodigal son. And when the dad sees him, he forgets everything that the prodigal son did and just wraps his arms around him and says, let's have a feast.
Yep.
I think this is the same, not totally the same scenario, but very similar.
Yeah, it really is. In fact, we don't hear Jacob bring up, really, everything that happened in the past. And the only thing that's brought up, of course, when he's already made the decision, is that Reuben's not going to be, we see that Joseph's sons are going to be the ones that are going to be blessed. And because of what has happened, that is not going to be forgotten about. But it's forgiven. We see that in a sense. We say. And exactly, I was about to say, with things that we do wrong, there's consequences. Things we may be forgiven for God, but we may have to pay for some the rest of our life because of what we've done. But God will forgive you. And that's what we see that happening there. David, go ahead.
I often wonder if Jacob was thinking about that seed promise as well, throughout all of this. I know Joseph's lineage is not, Judah's was, but, still Judah was affected too. I mean, with all this famine, and then knowing, okay, we're going to go to maybe even at the time, I'm not sure if he realized how fertile the territory where they were going. I don't know if he didn't know until he got there.
Right.
But nevertheless, when he got there, God is still taking care of us. This seed promise is still going to continue. That's been promised, to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob.
That's exactly. And it is, and it's it's huge. It's so important to see that, and to know and to understand. Is it's kind of interesting because we don't recall where they sent out something to tell everybody in the whole world that it was going to be 7 years of famine. I mean, I'm sure it got out, but even though someone saying that, people got to be thinking, what? There ain't no way. We're not going to have 7 years. It's just like here. If we go through a drought for a couple months, what do we have in our mind? It's going to happen soon. It's gonna rain. It's gonna rain sooner or later. It's gonna happen. I mean, I want you to think about 7 years. 7 years. 365 times 7 days a year. I don't know what that adds up to, but that, but here, I'm not that quick. But you know, you see that. So all that taking place, happening, we see here in verses 14 through 15. We're going to find here the affection of his, that he has for his brothers, and this is the moment he's been waiting for. I mean, how many times do you think he wanted to hug his brothers? I mean, so many times, and we see this. So let's go and read what happens here, 14 through 15, please.
Then he fell on his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, and Benjamin wept on his neck. Moreover, he kissed all his brothers and wept over them. After that, his brothers talked with him.
Thank you. So, you know, here we see, this is one of the greatest lessons of forgiveness, we said a moment ago. I mean, Joseph could have stood before them and said, you know, everything you guys did was wrong. It was terrible. You were horrible to me. And you know, and Dad, yeah, may have favored me, but you should have never done what you did. He didn't do any of that, did he? At least we don't hear of it. And so, in fact, what we find here in verse 15, we see here that we learn about this forgiveness. We learn that, you know, after they hug and they kiss and they just, it's just like anything, a family reunion, they start talking. They just want to talk. We don't know what they talked about. We don't know what went on. You know, it's probably, how have you been doing? You know, what's been going on? You know, and so on. Or they're probably like, Joseph, how are you who you are? How is this possible? We know God has handed, but to make you second in command, a Hebrew, over other Egyptians, how is this possible? So when we think about this forgiveness, brethren, we need to realize that our families, and this is what we learned today, for us today, must be a place of forgiveness. It has to be a place of forgiveness. There are no perfect people, without a doubt. And sometimes parents make mistakes just as children do. Siblings make mistakes. Spouses make mistakes. Parents need to also own up to those things, just like they would expect their children to own up to them. The same thing. And, you know, we will develop, you know, a realization in the children that they have parents that are trying to understand everything they're going through. Because we've all, you know, how many times have you ever had your mom and dad say, trust me, I understand, I've been there before. You know, I mean, I've heard that several times, and we all have it, and we see that, and we think about it, and that's from experience. But at the same time, when we make a mistake, we should be willing to tell our children, you know, with them, causes some of them, we blew it, you know, and not have the problem saying that, and having that quick, sorrowful forgiveness in it that is there. Brethren, we learn that there is no end. Here it is. There is no end to forgiveness. There is no end. Joseph was showing, you know, that you know what the past is gone, and no way to get back. Lord's Prayer, you know, I'm at almost out of time, so I'm going to read real quick. You know, makes Matthew 6:12, forgive us our debtors as we forgive our debtors. You know, there's the important part of that, of what we see there. And in fact, we know that verse 14 goes on to say, for if you forgive them their trespasses, your heavenly Father will do what? Will also forgive you. It's exactly right. We see that. In fact, you know, how often, I know this number now, how often do we do it? You know, we see here with Jesus in Matthew 18:21-35. I'm not going to read it for the time period that we have. I'll have it up there. I'll skip through it. But is it 7 times? And he said, no. 7 times 70. How much is that? 490. Now, let me ask you this. How many of y'all think you can keep up with that? How many of y'all, I mean, do we keep a tally in our phone saying, that was number 632, I'm almost, wait, 632, I'm way over it. No, you say, I'm 485. 5 more, and you're done, I'm never forgiving you again. What this is God knows we're not going to keep up with that number. So God is saying forgiveness never stops. It's always there. David, go ahead.
Yeah, the whole chapter of Matthew 18 is just a great exposition on forgiveness, because, you know, Jesus talks about, you know, if your brother trespasses against you, point it out, go to him and tell him about it, rebuke him, and if he repents, what? You must forgive him.
That's right.
And then at the last part, you know, it's kind of an antithesis statement, verse number 35, so likewise, you know, the whole point of Jesus telling that parable, so likewise shall my heavenly Father do also to you, if you from your hearts forgive not everyone his brother their trespasses. So if you're not willing to forgive, God's not going to forgive you.
That's exactly right. It's really clear about that. And you know, forgiveness is important. You know, there's going to be, I think, a lot of people left out of heaven that are Christians because they decided they weren't gonna forgive somebody. And, you know, we need to really think about that for a moment. I mean, it's really important. Just because you forgive somebody, though, we need to understand, doesn't mean that they're not gonna have consequences because of what they've done, or things that we see that even with God. But the difference with God, God forgets it. God forgets it. You and I, we have a hard time doing that, don't we? But we need to learn to try to do that. Doug, go ahead.
When Jesus said that, also that most of the population probably could not count to 70, much less 7 times 70.
That's really funny. That's exactly right.
You
It's a
know,
good
and
point.
it's almost like an infinite number to them.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, well, think of counting to the 490. I mean, it's like, but, you know, it is. I mean, and I believe that the whole issue that, you know, 7 in the Bible is considered, what is that number considered?
Perfectly.
Perfect, complete, perfection, exactly right, whole, and that's what we see with this. But there's a lot of verses, I'm not going to go through these, a lot of verses that deal with forgiveness because I'm out of time. But just let me finish up the area here real quick, I'll do it in 1 minute. Pharaoh offers help Joseph's family. I'll read this really fast so we can see what happens. Now the report of it was heard in Joseph's house, saying Pharaoh's house, Joseph's brothers have come. So it pleased Pharaoh and his servants well. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, say to your brothers, do this, load your animals and depart, go to the land of Canaan, bring your father and your household and come to me. I will give you the best of the land of Egypt, and you will eat the fat of the land. See, this where it says Joseph's brothers have come, I believe he probably said this earlier. You know, he's already said this, he's aware of this. And we go on a little further. Now you are commanded to do this. Take carts out of the land of Egypt for your little ones and your wives. Bring your father and come. Also, do not be concerned about your goods, for the best of all the land of Egypt is yours. In other words, don't worry about bringing everything. You know, you can leave that there. Just come on. Have enough food to get you here. And then he says, then the sons of Israel did so. And Joseph gave them carts according to the command of Pharaoh, and he gave them provisions for their journey. And so we see this happening. I'm going to just skip right. No, let me do. I'm going to move on. And then finally, the journey home. So we see all this happening. They're going to head out now. I want everybody to see this. The way of Shur is the way they would go. There's 2 ways. This would be through the desert. That's the quickest way to get to Hebron. As we're going to see Beersheba next week. So he says in verse 22, he gave to all of them, to each man changes of garments, but to Benjamin he gave 300 pieces of silver, 5 changes of garments. Oh, guess what? He's getting a little more. He's testing him a little farther, just a little bit more. And he said to his father these things, 10 donkeys loaded with good things of Egypt, 10 female donkeys loaded with grain, bread, and food for his father for the journey. So he sent the brothers away, and they departed, and he said to them, see that you do not become troubled along the way. Then they went out to eat. In other words, you know, don't worry about what's happened in the past. Just forget it. Let's move on. Don't worry about what Dad says. Just get it done. Then they went out of Egypt, and they came to the land of Canaan to Jacob their father, and they told him, saying, Joseph is still alive, and he is governor over all the land of Egypt. And Jacob's heart stood still, because he did not believe them. There it is. But when they told him all the words which Joseph had said to them, and when he saw the carts which Joseph had sent to carry him, the spirit of Jacob their father revived. Then Israel said, it is enough. Joseph my son is still alive. I will go and see him before I die. Brethren, Joseph knew his father. You know, even 17 years old. He knew that he had to see these things. Because he knew they couldn't afford to buy all that, didn't he? There ain't no way they bought all that stuff. And it wasn't just, you don't just give those things away. So it had to be real. And he saw this, and we're going to see next week when we get in, of course, to chapter 46. 46, we're going to see that they head that way. And it's just a beautiful story. All right, we're in there. 3 minutes over. All right, we'll stop there. Things like, yeah, that's a lot to cover in a little bit of time. One, go ahead.
All the things that Joseph did to his brothers, like putting the cup in Benjamin's sack, sending the money back, that was testing them. But don't you think also he got a little bit of, not revenge, but, what's the word I want? Yeah.
I don't think he looked at it that way because the way his character, what we see, he's constantly putting God first in everything.
But he knew they would be scared.
Oh, of course he knew they would be scared, but he wanted to see how they would react. That's what it all was, and it's a huge thing, and it teaches us something. You know, we don't want to be doing things just to make us feel good. You know, we treat others bad to make us feel better. We don't wanna do that, and that's what we see with Joseph, and how great that is, that Joseph understood that. His brothers probably would have reacted a different way, but oh well, we're gonna leave it at that. All right, we'll end there, thank you.
Good morning, how are you doing?
Have we something?
Good?